What's going to happen after capitalism? Well, MIT, for example, predicts society will collapse in 2040. And on top of that, there are already very clear indicators that we are in late-stage capitalism. Massive corporate greed, shrinkflation, an economy primarily built on low-interest debt, corporations trying to squeeze every single dollar possible out of consumers, and the list goes on and on. Now, what is late-stage capitalism? In as simple English as possible, an absurd and unsustainable economy that favors the wealthy at the expense of the middle class. So basically, what we have right now. Massive and increasing corporate profits without an equal increase in salaries. Good for the rich, bad for the middle class. Stock markets at all-time highs. Good for the rich, bad for those less invested, like the middle class. Extremely expensive and unaffordable real estate prices. Good for those who own it, like the rich, and bad for those who want to buy it, like the middle class. And an economy that must continue to grow year over year to fuel these inflated prices, with a population that is growing less and resources that are finite. Eventually, something must break. Now, the signs are present, and if this is in fact the case, and assuming that we don't destroy ourselves in this end stage, it begs the question, what comes next? Now, while only time will truly tell, what we can do is try to piece together what may happen based on the data that we currently have available. And in order to do so, we must dive deep into concepts like artificial intelligence, robotics, universal basic income, and the purpose of an economy. Now, in my opinion, over the next few decades, society will either transcend into a golden age of wealth and of prosperity and a good quality of life for all, or it will descend into a dystopian, corporate-led nightmare where the division of wealth between the upper 1% and everybody else, even the top 10%, is so wide that there will literally be extreme wealth and poverty with no in-between. And which future ends up in our timeline directly depends on the decisions we humans make over the next decade. So, without further ado, let's look into our future. Before we can talk about the two possible futures, the utopian and the dystopian one, we must talk about the 4 bricks that either of those futures will be built upon. And the first one of those bricks is artificial intelligence. AI has taken the world by storm over the last few months. It's proven to us that it can do some tasks better than humans, but it's also proven to us that it does some tasks way worse than humans, at least for now. The thing about AI is that it continues to learn and it continues to grow. And a lot of the time, it does those things exponentially. And all things that can do anything exponentially eventually affect the world greatly. And economically, artificial intelligence is already making a huge impact, even in its current state. It is taking people's jobs. It's making other jobs obsolete. And even in its current non-perfect state, over 50% of companies say that they will incorporate artificial intelligence at some point this year. And what's more interesting, if you look at the type of jobs that are most at risk, it's actually not the jobs that require less training, but in fact, it's the jobs that are traditionally considered highly skilled. Paralegals, accountants, web developers, programmers, and coders. These are skilled positions. Artificial intelligence is coming after skilled labor. And on top of that, the jobs most at risk right now are high-paying jobs. And as AI improves, this trend will surely increase, not decrease. But what about AI in its perfect form? A hypothetical point in time when artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence and grows rapidly and uncontrollably. There is still much division on when this will take place in the scientific community, but a surprising number of estimates puts it sometime in the 2040s. Oddly enough, around the same time that MIT has predicted societal collapse. AI will most likely continue to improve as it approaches singularity, and it will become more competent, able to do more specialized tasks in the medical field, in the technological fields, in accounting and finance, in marketing, in law, and in many others. Think about it. If you, say, had to defend yourself legally, would you choose a human lawyer who will cost thousands of dollars every single hour, or an artificial intelligence that has every single aspect of the law, every loophole, every court case, every possible legal angle imaginable, and every possible defense memorized, ready to be used in milliseconds at a fraction of the cost? Because it has no kids to feed, no cars or houses to buy, and no material desires. And its only goal is to defend you from every possible legal angle imaginable. Food for thought. The main point here, though, is not about what AI is capable of doing in the current economy, in capitalism. Remember, we are looking beyond that. The main point in regard to our utopian or dystopian futures is that AI, superintelligence, will at some point surpass human intelligence and will most likely be the brain that controls whatever replaces capitalism. Because whatever replaces capitalism will almost certainly be born from AI. And the even more profound takeaway here is that our next golden age or our next dark age depends exactly on who controls this super intelligence. Now, we'll talk about that more here in a second, but before we get there, we've talked about the brains, AI. Now, let's talk about the muscle. Capitalism is based on labor. You work at the market rate, you get paid at the market rate, and you use that money to buy what you need at the market rate. AI will continue to improve and most likely eliminate more and more jobs that require mental labor. But what about manual labor? That is where robotics comes in. Now, right now, robotics is still in its early stages, although robotics used in industry has grown exponentially. From less than 1,000 units in the 1970s to well over 1.6 million robots today. And what makes that number even more unfathomable is that that growth has largely taken place without artificial intelligence. And when you combine these two, robotics and artificial intelligence, is where you can start to see the growth possibilities in the coming years, not just in regard to the number of robots, but to their abilities. And if you extrapolate far enough, who's to say that an AI-powered robot won't be intelligent enough or dexterous enough to repair itself or to create its own replacement when it senses its usefulness coming to an end, and eventually to get to a point where all robots will create their replacements. In 20, 30, or 40 years, will robots just as dexterous as humans, powered by AI much smarter than humans, replace all jobs, both mental and manual? The skeptics will say no, not at least for hundreds of years. And the conspiracy theorists will say yes, it's already happening. And the right answer is probably somewhere in between. Still a ways away, but not as far as you might think. Maybe, I don't know, in the 2040s? None of this is possible, though, without energy. If you think about it, really, all energy already comes from the sun. Our food is either plants or it eats plants, and plants get energy from the sun. Oil comes from fossilized dinosaurs who either ate plants or ate other animals who ate plants. And those plants received their energy from photosynthesis from the sun. Now, say what you will about solar power, but at the end of the day, to fuel continued growth, more and more energy will be required. Artificial intelligence, supercomputers, and eventually self-sustaining robots already do and will continue to require more and more immense amounts of energy. And the sun has a near unlimited amount of that. And as capitalism moves towards its end, and as humans move into whatever will come next, harnessing that energy through solar power will play a massive role. In fact, the solar industry was already worth a whopping $189 billion in 2022, but it's expected to explode to $832 billion, almost $1 trillion by 2032. But not only is there an increase in volume taking place, there's also an increase in efficiency. 2021 was the first year that more than 50% of residential solar panels installed had an efficiency rating higher than 20%. Just a short 10 years ago, it was only 0.6% of all installations. And on top of that, with new technologies like perovskite solar cells or carbon nanotube-based solar modules, efficiency will soon enough be pushed much higher. And if we ignore the politics, the electric vehicles, the natural gas versus solar arguments, just for a second, and we look at the bigger picture, a highly intelligent singularity with a robotics workforce will require constantly increasing amounts of energy, and solar will deliver. So, as we move into the real question of this video, will our next economic system be a golden age of prosperity or a dark age of extreme haves and have-nots? One more brick must be covered, and that is what happens to us as these changes take place in the coming years. Before we transition from capitalism into whatever comes next, either positive or negative, there will most likely be an in-between period where there are not enough jobs not yet taken by AI and robotics for the amount of people wanting or needing to work. This will most likely be a dark period in humanity's growth. Companies still operating under capitalistic tendencies will continue to fire workers and replace them with robots. Investors will benefit from higher profit margins, but employees who make up the majority of the middle class will suffer with fewer job opportunities, or will have to accept lower wages to stay competitive against machine. And unless something is instituted during this period, the majority of mankind will suffer. At first, I believe the government will institute some sort of diversity system that companies must follow. Say, for example, for every robot or AI implemented, a human job must also be filled. And that will work at first, but companies will lobby, and lobbying will work. And eventually, that will not be enough. And at that point, the most likely outcome will be some form of universal basic income, funded by taxes on the profits generated from companies using artificial intelligence and robotics. Now, there is a massive debate as to the effectiveness of universal basic income. Proponents see it as a way for equality. Opponents see it as laziness funded by our taxes. And right now, I think both arguments are probably valid. But in 20, 30, or 40 years, when most of the work is being done by AI and robotics, I'm not sure there'll be a choice. This sort of stopgap in between late-stage capitalism and whatever comes next may or may not be good for the average person. If implemented correctly, perhaps everyone will have more than enough. But with the government's track record, the more likely outcome is that everyone will just barely have enough to get by. And this leads me to what this video is truly about. What comes next? Now, I'm a capitalist at heart. I love the ability to make money based on hard work, skill, and effort. I love that money can reward both hard work and smart work. And I love that in a truly free market, everyone can make something of themselves. With that said, I am not a blind capitalist. I like capitalism because it's currently the best option, not because it's perfect. I also see the cracks starting to form. The house of cards economy that has been developing for decades, fueled by increased debt, pushed forward by constant growth. But that is not sustainable. Populations cannot grow forever to support continued economic growth, and resources, which are also limited, have a maximum threshold. And when that threshold is reached, things become dangerous because investments like the stock market, like retirement accounts, and like Social Security are all based on the idea that the economy will continue to grow. So, as we approach this inevitable maximum threshold, what comes next? That depends on ownership. Artificial intelligence and robotics will either be owned by corporations, as they are now, or they will be owned by the public. And that simple distinction, in my humble opinion, will have the most profound effect on humanity's future than any other distinction in history. If AI and robotics are owned by corporations, then most likely a dystopian future awaits us. It means we never truly went beyond capitalism, and it means that corporations own the two most important things our species has ever created: unlimited intelligence and unlimited labor. If this is the future that awaits us, corporations will act as they always have, extracting as much money as possible for their owners and their investors. They will act as they always have, but with much more power and much more influence. And access to AI will be akin to a private club or a private community or a private park. It will be pay to play, and artificial intelligence will be used to extract whatever little money the middle class has from odd jobs and gig economics and universal basic income. Robotics will be used as labor for the corporations that control it. Artificial intelligence will create cures for many illnesses, but those cures will be sold at a price. And if money is scarce, labor, similar to indentured servitude, will serve as payment, doing whatever random jobs are left not done by robotics. Artificial intelligence will be a tool for corporations and their owners to further the gap between them and everybody else. Artificial intelligence and robotics right now are controlled in that very way by corporations for profit. And right now, because we're in the early stages of this next technological revolution, it doesn't really matter, and it seems like business as usual. But as the years go by and artificial intelligence gets closer and closer to a singularity, it'll become more and more apparent how dangerous concentrated ownership of artificial intelligence is. As a capitalist and as someone with a degree in finance of all things, even I do not believe that corporate ownership of AI and robotics is a good thing. In fact, if and when that occurs, I think it'll be the most dangerous, worst case scenario for anyone unfortunate enough to be part of the middle class. And this scenario would be very similar, unfortunately, to the movie Elysium. Now, on the other hand, the other side of the coin is much brighter for everyone. But getting there will be difficult because it'll be pushing against the status quo. And that utopian alternative is public ownership of both AI and robotics. It is a world where AI works to solve humanity's problems like disease, not corporate problems like profit maximizing. It is a world where robotics works to eliminate the required manual labor for food production, housing production, clothing production, and all other basic necessities, while simultaneously producing enough that money ceases to be required or exist. Money matters right now because goods are finite and because labor has value. But money will not matter if goods become less than finite and labor is virtually free by self-sustaining robots. Now, this scenario is very akin to a popular TV show, Star Trek, a future where all needs are met and humans are able to pursue their true passions. This future is much harder to reach, unfortunately, because it goes against the status quo. It goes against capitalism. It also requires global cooperation, which seems unlikely at best and impossible at worst. But as we ever so slowly approach the singularity, whether that happens in 2040 or whether that happens much before or much later, what should be on all of our minds is who owns these assets? And is there a push at all for that ownership to become public? As time progresses, if that answer slowly becomes yes, then we're on track for a brighter future. But if instead, as the years tick by, that answer becomes more and more clearly no, then, my friend, a dark future awaits.